There's nothing worse than being called into your boss's office and being given the sort of rather bad news that the business would like to see you go. Often we find with reasonably senior business executives, these conversations are not quite as cut and dry as maybe you might find with a more junior executive who you're exiting from the business. Often with senior executives, there's a number of factors involved. The business has not usually come to this decision lightly. They're often quite sensitive to the individual and the impact that this type of conversation can have. And you'll often find in a good employer scenario, you will often be given some options as a senior executive, and the conversation might go along the lines of, look, it hasn't really worked out for all the parties for various reasons. We would like to move towards exiting you from the business, and they may present you with a couple of options. They might offer you a more generous payout, for example. They might offer you executive outplacement services. They might try and create a soft landing for you, if you like. And the problem you often have is that the executive, even the most senior executives, are often a little bit caught off guard by this conversation. And the business is usually moving reasonably quickly to make a decision. And so, although there might be options on the table being presented to you, it's not a scenario where you often have weeks to make a decision. You're often being required to make a decision within 24, 48 hours, and the company is going to give you, A or B or maybe a C option, and you've really got to kind of come back to the table once you've had a chance to kind of process the news with what you want your decision to be. It's a really delicate time, and my first piece of advice is always pick up the phone to a trusted advisor, talk it through, talk through the scenarios that are being presented to you so that you do make a good decision. So don't try and go this decision alone, and family might not be the best sounding board in this scenario. You might need someone independent. So, book into my diary, if you like, someone who's a corporate headhunter who can say, well, look, this is the best option. You want to also carefully negotiate that exit. So the business has effectively decided they want you to exit. There might be a little bit of room to move. And the things that I really focus on during this time is referenceability. How would references be handled? How would the message to the market be handled about your exit from the company, the organisation? And so it's very important at this time, when you're kind of trying to agree maybe financial terms, that you're thinking about some of the other aspects, which is, well, who's going to be my referee going forward? If you can get agreement in those discussions, those final discussions as you're working out your exit from the business, if you can get an agreement around a reference check, or how a reference check would be handled, or how the message would be handled to the market. So the message might be, we mutually agreed to part ways. So your messaging perception is all very important, and you might not be thinking immediately about that. They might be dangling the carrot of, well, we're going to pay you out 3 months or 6 months, etc., etc. And you're thinking about the financial components of a package, but you do have to think about references, because there's nothing great about being exited from a business. So if you can get some control over how references would be handled, how the message to the market would be handled. An ideal scenario might be that the message is you resigned from the business, not the other way around, that you were exited from the business due to a performance issue. You've usually got a lot more room to move if the scenario is not based on a performance issue, if you've not done something terribly wrong, if it's maybe just a cultural issue and we kind of would really prefer not to work with you, we think it would be in the best interests of both parties, you've probably got a little bit more room to move in those scenarios. So you've got to kind of just quietly work through the issues, but you certainly want to lock in on how references would be handled post the exit. You want to handle how you are handling that message to market. And then finally, if any form of executive outplacement service is provided to you, you want to take that option up. You might not think you need it. You might have your own preferred suppliers, but try and work through the options there. You might be able to put forward a preferred coach or a preferred mentor. There may be some room to move there. So there's always a little bit of wiggle room. It's not an ideal scenario being let go from a business, but there are some, simple techniques to try and navigate it. And the key is not to make a decision on a spot. The key is certainly not to sign a deed of release unless you're 100% ready to fully exit the business and you've checked all of your various options and what's, being provided to you. You might need to go and get an employment lawyer's, second opinion on a matter. You might need to go back to the company and say, look, I just need 24 hours to check with my advisors before I sign off on X, Y, and Z. You must be making informed decisions. You often don't get a lot of options. The business usually wants to exit you, but often we find with these senior executives, there is a little bit of room to move. And you need to think about this and how you might handle it. And if your spider senses are kind of telling you that this might be coming up, you can start to think about it, start to think about the different scenarios and how you might handle it.